It's the end of Renault as we know it. It's the end of Renault as we know it. But not Alpine. Drop me a like if you want to hear a full-length version of that, because that was too fun to make. Much like the other week when I was trying to make a Williams video, but Alpine just could not stop making headlines, they are now in the headlines again, with potentially the team no longer having Renault power, the team under Bruno Famin having had enough. And it probably had something to do with the engines going bang at Le Mans and them being one of the earlier retirements. And especially when you saw Bruno Famin showing off to Ocon and Gasly just how good the World Endurance team was. This was his wheelhouse, this was his stomping grounds, and that maybe one day you could get Gasly doing this Le Mans. Maybe as part of it, maybe some kind of guarantee, and then look at that. It all goes to absolute pot. And now, just a couple of days after that fact, this article from motorsport.com, which tells me that this could genuinely happen, shows that the team known as Alpine may no longer be powered by Renault engines and may instead become a customer team in order to try and become competitive. What? Alpine is a Renault Group company and it's not powered by Renault's own power units. What? This makes absolutely no sense. It would be a colossal shame if Renault no longer is powering an F1 team and it happening in this manner. This feels different to previous instances of Renault leaving the sport because Renault chose to leave. Now it's its own subsidiary going, you know what? Stuff it! Or whatever they say in French. If you're French, let me know in the comments what the French equivalent is of stuff it. Because right now, it's seemingly really not that good. Because Bruno Famin and Alpine are reportedly putting out feelers to different engine manufacturers to potentially have Alpine be supplied by a customer operation. Them willing to sacrifice their work status to try and be better. Even Renault and Luca De Meo, the CEO of the Renault Group, admits that the Renault power unit in the turbo hybrid era has not been good, and it has not been good for a decade and may continue to not be that good, considering that 2026 is going to be an evolution of the turbo hybrid era. So even Renault's kind of going like, they're floundering right now. And yet at the same time, Renault is not prepared to sell. But what are they doing? So Renault owns an F1 team that is not powered by their own operations, potentially. This is getting insane right now. And the biggest question here I have is what's going to happen with Pierre Gasly? Because it's quite clear that during Le Mans weekend, Pierre Gasly was being shown around the Alpine garage to try and ingratiate himself into the Alpine family, that maybe he might be staying, the team being able to exercise his option that he has for 2025 to stay with the team, because, as Gasly has said many times, he would like to be part of a works operation. And if he chooses to stay for 2025, and then for 2026 they suddenly go, you know what, being a works team, it's not all that's cracked up to be. We're so bad, we're willing to become dog's bodies. Sort of like what happened with McLaren in 2014. They lost their work status with Mercedes, even though it was a long time coming when Mercedes joined the sport, but in 2014 it looked really bad for McLaren. And then 2015, oh boy. And that was a Honda works operation. Honda. Renault. Oh, okay, I see. There is a parallel here, but it's still a very surreal one. But the main issue here is that there are discussions ongoing with rival manufacturers for a customer engine deal, potentially. And all this being driven by a really difficult start to the current campaign, the fact that Renault's power unit is still not getting any better, and it's now colossally overweight. So Pierre Gasly is being sold a promise that may or may not even happen. And now Esteban Ocon leaving might be looking at our entire situation and going like, you know what, I'm kind of glad that I'm not there right now because the team's falling apart even more than anybody thought. Because yeah, granted, Team Enstone and Villy Chatillon, they did not see eye to eye and they have not seen eye to eye for many decades. But this would be effectively Alpine just going, we're just going to cut off an arm to spite our face. And that means they are just Team Enstone, basically. They are licensing out the Alpine name. They aren't actually Alpine. This is just really weird. This is incredibly surreal. I'm really going off script for this because this is just blowing my mind right now. It's 10 o'clock at night and oh my goodness, this has been a very long day, but I was not prepared for this. I don't think any of us were prepared for this because you think about it. Okay, Alpine becomes a customer team. Who's going to supply them right now? Because, yeah, sure, Mercedes is dropping Aston Martin. They could maybe take up Alpine. After all, Team Enston were powered by Mercedes for a couple of years when they were Lotus, so they could take up that relationship again. But I think, quite frankly, Mercedes is happy with just having 3 teams. They've got their own team, they got Williams as a very advanced technical partner, and they got McLaren in a seat at the table situation where McLaren gets to have a very big say in where the engine goes. And considering how good McLaren is, and they might be in with a shout of the Constructors' title this season, I think having McLaren's feedback with Mercedes is absolutely top-notch. They don't need any more people because, yeah, it's quite obvious. Ferrari, good luck. No, they're quite happy with just having Haas as an accessory because that seems to be quite nice, and I doubt there'd be any more cupboard space within Maranello for them to fit in. Red Bull Powertrains, apparently there were talk with Red Bull Powertrains, but Christian Horner is reportedly not all that keen with establishing a works relationship or a customer relationship with a team that isn't their own. So, as Horner has said, he would rather just focus on what's going on with Red Bull and Racing Bulls before he would consider leasing out his engines to other manufacturers. And of course, this is all brand new territory for Red Bull, even though technically what they're doing is essentially just modifying the Honda Power Unit of 2022 or something like that. And then there's Audi, maybe. They're coming in as a brand new manufacturer, but at the same time, though, that's the same issue as what Red Bull Powertrains is having. They are brand new to this, so they are just going to want to figure out themselves on their own. But then there is a really big issue here, because apparently there is a stipulation that if a team cannot find a power unit supplier, then the FIA and Formula One management is basically going to compel every single team to put in a bid to potentially give this team a power unit because they can't go spare without one. So essentially, these teams, one of them could be mandated to supply Alpine with an engine deal, maybe at a cut price deal, because, it's sort of a shotgun wedding or something like that. And supposedly, it would be preferably down to an engine supplier that does not have multiple fingers in many pies. So Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull Powertrains, they're out, and that leaves, Renault will be gone. I mean, they'll be making a Renault engine that nobody's going to buy unless they can convince Andretti to come in. Maybe they might get that deal after all before Cadillac comes in, and then Renault might leave for good. But that leaves, Audi's not going to happen. Well, maybe Honda. Okay. This was something that motorsport.com mentioned in their article, and I think that this idea has legs, because if you think about it, what kind of situation are we going to be going into in 2026 that involves a Honda driver? Yuki Tsunoda. He has, in the video I made earlier this week, in fact, yesterday, I think, I don't know which order I'm going to be making these videos in, has been contracted to Racing Bulls for next year because he's part of Racing Bulls and Honda still powers their engines. They're going to be gone. Aston Martin and Honda are going to be partnering up in an exclusive works deal. That is until the FIA and Formula One management get in the way and make Honda supply power units, maybe helping subsidize them, the extra cost in making extra engines and power units and batteries and stuff. Honda might like the idea of having another team to balance off research and development on. And hey, getting a Honda deal with the power unit supplier being really keen to kick on in 2026 and go for a constructor's title bid to have a second team, Alpine might actually be onto a blinder here because, a Honda engine, even if it's a brand new iteration of it and not necessarily the Red Bull Powertrains Honda, it's better than the Renault engine, it potentially being 0.2 to 0.5 of a second off the pace, 30 to 40 horsepower down just right off the bat. It's crazy that we're in this situation, that Renault, this powerhouse of Formula One for half a century, is at the point where it is quite easily the slowest and weakest engine on the grid, and not even its own team, its own outfit, wants to be powered by it anymore. How bad has it got here? And we're in this situation where Renault says we are not prepared to sell any part of our team whatsoever, even though it's prepared to sell a quarter of it almost to celebrities and Deadpool. I don't buy that for a single second here, because remember, there are still many hundreds of millions of dollars on the table if Renault just wants to get rid of that team to other investors and allow Alpine to go it alone as essentially a standalone deal without Renault Group's help, or maybe they just take a minority stake. They could easily make a lot of money back that they've been pouring into research and development for the 2026 power unit because, quite frankly, Renault's been basically going, You know what? We hope that the chassis situation may negate the issue with the engine it not being a big deal. Well, I've got news for you, Renault. It is going to matter. It's very clear that the brand new regulations are going to very much matter on how good your engine is. And Mercedes have been rubbing their hands together. Mercedes are reportedly going to be the best, and Renault reportedly going to be the worst. And comments like, oh, the chassis will make up for the shortfall, that's not exactly encouraging now, is it? I'm just blown away by this. This is effectively, as I said at the beginning of this video, the end of Renault as we know it. I just can't get over the daftness of this. It's just like Alpine not being supplied by Renault and Le Mans being the straw that broke the baguette's back. Seriously. It's crazy. I feel really bad for the people that were Le Mans. Alpine and Le Mans, they have a strong history. Alpine, I think, is located not that far from Le Mans, and then returning at the top category seemed to be celebrated, and then they break down after 5 hours. They all broke down, essentially, and now Ocon actually might have gotten the best deal. He might have gotten off pretty easy, because, yeah, he may not be in Formula 1 anymore, or he may be at Haas, but Haas right now are looking better than Alpine. Oh my goodness! I didn't think Bruno Famin could pull a wild card like this, that he's prepared to give up the Renault status and these Renault power units for the sake of making Alpine look better and more competitive. He thinks that potentially being a customer team is more competitive. You know what? This is just copying McLaren again. This is what they're doing. They are absolutely doing this. They've been copying McLaren in terms of their overall strategic setup with all their technical directors, the 3 technical directors, and then of course getting David Sanchez, and then doing piecemeal upgrades slowly but surely instead of big upgrades here and there. Now what they're doing is essentially becoming a customer team, maybe to Honda, what McLaren tried to do in 2015 and it didn't work, maybe get themselves a seat at the table situation where Alpine becomes a loyal second to the exclusive Aston Martin Honda deal, and that means also it might give Yuki Tsunoda a safe haven after all. That might be the thing to convince Pierre Gasly to stay, because we might get a reuniting of Gasly and Tsunoda at the same team, them united with a power unit that they are kind of similar with, the Honda power unit supplying AlphaTauri. Those two are teammates, they absolutely love each other, they will be united in solidarity in getting that team back up to the top, and then being far more experienced than they used to be. So this team, it may be incredibly wholesome, and social media will absolutely lap it up, but you know what? If we get an Alpine-Honda combination, Tsunoda being there then suddenly makes sense, and we might see him being in charge of his own destiny, with both drivers being hard workers, being changed people, far more mature than they used to be, and a team motivated to get back at Red Bull. And I'm pretty sure that Honda's keen to get back at Red Bull and show that they can do the deed and get the Constructors' title without the need of Red Bull or Max Verstappen. Although, admittedly, they are probably quite grateful that they got those world titles. Pretty sure they are very, very much regretting them jumping the gun in 2021 and then realising, we're winning the title! Pull it back! Pull it back! Pull it back! That was the daftest situation I've ever seen. They're winning, and then they leave. This isn't like 2008 when they were terrible and they left, and there was an economic crisis. They were doing so well, and they were about to win a title, and then they just bolted. I don't get it. But hopefully Honda might stick around, and if they are mandated to have a second team, it might not be so bad. And especially Alpine being subservient to Honda. And okay, Papa Strong may not like the situation, but I'm pretty sure that he will be compensated in some way from Alpine. I mean, I don't know who's going to be supplying it, because I'm not sure what the Renault group is going to do with the situation, that they own a team that they are not providing engines to. What's going to happen with their engine department? Is it going to be sent off maybe to develop the hypercar engines, perhaps? Maybe go and focus on their own situation? And then maybe... this is bizarre. I mean, the idea of Team Enston that is basically owned by Renault not being Renault-powered? What? The strategic situation, it seems kind of interesting, but it's just boggling my mind that Bruno Famin is just willing to go along with this. But you know what? Maybe this was an inside job, because think about it. Where did Bruno Famin come from? He came from Peugeot. Peugeot and Renault? Yes, I know that technically they are under the same umbrella, I think, and that they are both French companies, so why would they want to sabotage the other? But maybe this is Peugeot's revenge. get Bruno Faman, a guy on the inside, to work for Renault, and then, okay, that's a bit of a joke there, and I could easily use the foam of doubt here, but I don't think I even need to use it, because this entire situation is just, it's just bonkers, and I don't know what else to say about this, except for the fact that if this goes ahead, and they are willing to leave Renault in the dust, then I'm not sure what's going to happen with Pierre Gasly, unless they get Yuki Tsunoda in to be his teammate, and then even then, they might have Mick Schumacher for next year. They might have Jack Doohan, because for 2025, they are still going to be powered by Renault because, well, they can't change that right now because it's too late. The rules are going to change next year because if they do change it, then it's going to be absolutely bonkers. And I knew that Alpine were in trouble, but I didn't think they'd be in this much trouble to willingly drop Renault. And all this time and effort and money, it's all going to be down the drain. They'll have no choice but to sell their stake, or a lot of their stake, to other celebrities, or to another investor. Maybe we might get a situation where Andretti does buy in, after all, a minority stake in the team, and then eventually buys more and more and more if they suddenly are competitive. Because Andretti does work with Honda, we could get a situation where over time, Alpine slowly phases itself out, and it becomes Andretti Honda, perhaps. But then again, it probably won't happen because Andretti Cadillac, they are like that. And they are determined to get themselves into Formula One no matter what through their own operation and as their own team. Even if the FIA has now suddenly turned against them and basically said, yeah, you should probably just buy out another teammate. And the fact that it's gotten really personal, it's gone to Congress, and now they're determined to stop Michael Andretti no matter what, all of these team dramas and angst, it's just getting really old at this point. Something I touch upon here, where Michael Andretti, a world champion of Formula One, was floored by what the boss of Liberty Media said to him personally. Oh, it's just getting savage out there.